EcoChurch was launched in 2016, and it provides a practical framework for churches across England and Wales and of all denominations to engage practically in caring for the earth, and for this to become embedded in every aspect of church life. It's an award scheme, so churches can register their intent to take action and then work towards bronze, silver and gold awards. Not because it's all about awards, but they enable us to measure and celebrate the progress that we can make. So it's a practical toolkit of resources and an online survey, as well as opportunities to join events like this, where ordinarily we'd be meeting in person, which we can't do today, but it's a chance to learn and share together. Almost a week ago, in a Netflix special, David Attenborough offered his witness statement about the perils that we are collectively facing on our planet, as well as his vision of hope for the future. It's surely a vital combination, bearing witness to what we see and know to be true, as climate change, habitat and species loss happens all around us, whilst also offering a vision of a different world, which is still just within reach. Whilst there might not be anyone amongst us today who has had the length of time on Earth or the breadth of experience of David Attenborough, we can all bear witness to the time that we are in, a time which scientists are now calling the Anthropocene because of the extent to which human beings have come to dominate and shape the planet. And my slides are just here, so let me just very quickly share those with you. There we go. We're living in a time of a global pandemic with understandably a lot of focus on health, jobs and the economy, but the wider backdrop of climate change and biodiversity loss present even more urgent and potentially catastrophic challenges. In 2018, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change produced a report saying that we had just 12 years left in which to limit temperature rise to within 1.5 degrees centigrade of pre-industrial levels. We've already used up 2 years of this. Even 1.5 degrees is potentially disastrous and would have huge consequences for our way of life. But we're currently on course for 3 to 4 degrees. This, if we allow it to happen, will mean the death of billions, as large parts of the planet will become uninhabitable. We will have destroyed our only home and much of the rest of God's creation with us. However, the IPCC report concluded that we still have a 50-50 chance of keeping temperature at 1.5 degrees, that increase, if we act now to reduce greenhouse gas emissions as fast as we can. And we can do this by, for example, shifting our economies away from fossil fuel, changing our diet to eat less meat and more dairy and a greater amount of plant food. So there are solutions, but we've got precious little time to implement them, and they need implementing at scale. We're in an emergency then, and I say this very respectfully, but the pandemic, serious as it is not the main story. Although it is related, since our continued destruction of the natural world will likely result in more pandemic outbreaks. But very much related to the climate crisis, we're also experiencing a biodiversity crisis. So as well as threatening life around the globe, and especially in the poorest parts of the world, we've also wiped out 60% of mammals, birds, fish and reptiles since 1970. If we stop to notice, these signs are in our everyday lives all around us. We are witnessing them. The changes and challenges are here, affecting the poorest the most. So there is then a justice issue for people, the poorest people today and future generations, as well as the rest of the natural world. The other critical part of our witness statement is that we worship a creator God. this beautiful image of earth space that's become so familiar to us. When God sees this, when he first saw it, when he made it, he saw it and said that it was very good. Genesis 1, which might be so familiar to us, is full of rich descriptions of the earth and a level of detailed design that could surely only be given by a God who cares for and loves his creation. And as people made in the image of God, we have a God-given responsibility to care for this earth. So we hold a vision here at Rocha UK of churches across the country understanding the biblical mandate to care for creation as a core part of our Christian mission, and to outwork this in practical ways across our communities, working with others to restore nature and our relationship with it. This is the ethos of EcoChurch, a community which now consists of more than 3,000 churches, many of which now have or are working towards an EcoChurch award. It's really at the award stage that we start to have any sense of impact. And there are currently over 900 awards that have been made, slightly fewer number of churches because some churches have now got multiple awards. And as of a week ago, we've got 14 churches across the country that have reached gold. And by the time that a church has reached a gold award, it's really in the DNA of how they do church. So how to get started? It's really relatively straightforward. Go to the EcoChurch website and we'll provide the link to this at the end of this presentation and also after today's conference. You can access the EcoChurch app and then you register yourself and you locate your church on a map. And you join your church and you can encourage others in your church to join too. And then you can start working through an online survey. There is no time limit as such, and you can use it as a planning tool. Ideally, find others to work on this with you. Find out what people in your church are interested in. You'd be amazed how many times in starting an EcoChurch journey, people discover others in the church who've got similar interests and passion that they just didn't know about before. But it's not just for a special interest group. This is about our mission as a church, integrated, holistic mission. So ultimately, try to include everyone in the vision of EcoChurch. And here on this, later on this afternoon in one of the workshops, you can hear from various churches at various stages in their journey about how they've got started and about how they've worked to embed this in their church and to get others involved. In practical terms, there are 5 key categories of EcoChurch. I'll try to highlight as we go through these how they relate to net zero carbon and also how you might approach EcoChurch during this time that we're in of a pandemic. So the first category is worship and teaching, because part of what's at the root of our disconnection with nature and land is an issue of spirituality. So this category underpins the whole. If we understand how much God loves the earth, his creation, and how he sees our part in it, we're more likely to respond. So enjoy it. Celebrate God's creation in your worship, in our collective and our personal relationships with God. Seasons and specific times of year, such as creation time that has just ended, give us opportunities to celebrate and to reflect and to repent. But I encourage you daily to find joy in creation. Autumn is one of the most beautiful seasons of the year. So just go out and look at the leaves, notice the spiders' webs and enjoy it. Increasingly too, though, we're hearing of a need to respond to grief for all that we have lost and are losing. And so along with joy, there is too a place for lamentation and repentance, for our own contribution to the environmental destruction that we're witnessing. There are lots of resources to help you with this. Tenets of the King has been produced by Operation Noah. That's a series of Bible studies. There's Saying Yes to Life, the Archbishop of Canterbury's Lent book for this year, which was written by Ruth Valerio. There's Doxicology, a brand new album from Resound Worship, some of which we'll hear of in our closing worship today when Joel Payne joins us. And during this time, maybe we can try a different way of being church. Many of us might not be back in our buildings yet or able to do our usual activities, but maybe you can explore holding a service outside or trying Muddy or Forest Church, some of which we experienced together this morning from All Saints. Also, I just want to tell you about Climate Sunday, which launched on the 6th of September and is a year-long campaign to get churches to commit to take action, whether to join Eco Church or Eco Congregation in Scotland and Ireland, or CAFOD's Live Simply scheme. And it's about holding a climate service, exploring the theological and scientific basis of creation care, and then committing to take action and to pray. And joining with other churches. This is a year-long campaign which will culminate next September in all jointly making a call to action ahead of the COP26. So worship and teaching is a great place to start on our journey to net zero, because before we even start thinking about target setting and measuring carbon, we need, as Pope Francis describes it, an ecological conversion of our hearts and minds. Then we're ready for a more practical level of engagement. So the buildings and land categories of Eco Church both reflect that we have assets to look after and steward, and that the impacts of how we manage these are more than just financial ones. For some churches, buildings is the most challenging section of all, as we strive to heat, light and furnish our churches cost effectively, and often within the restrictions of them being heritage buildings. But there are things that we can all do regardless of the type of building that we have. There are green and ethical investment implications at various points in the survey. For example, whether electricity and gas is renewable, or indeed on-site generated, and then setting targets for carbon reduction, and now linking straight to Climate Steward's 360 carbon tool, which Caroline and Adrian will talk more about in one of this afternoon's workshops. Renewable energy, collectively as the church community, we have huge buying power, and by acting together, we can show demand for renewable energy and send a clear and powerful message to the government and businesses that Christians are prepared to lead the way in moving our money out of fossil fuels and into renewable energy. There are also questions in this section about how to invest in the fabric and maintenance of buildings, including, for example, considering sustainable refurbishment if you're at the point of wanting to undertake a building project. And there are also some very creative solutions out there for how you can be using and meeting in your churches. This is Christ Church in Toxteth in Liverpool, now also a gold awarded church, and rather than heat and light the whole of their building for their services, they meet in a marquee, and they have another one for their children's work. So there are lots of things that we can do. And then also, whilst there are questions about the fabric and maintenance, we can use our buildings as a way of serving others, as we might already be doing in running toddler groups during midweek, for example. But what about running a repair cafe or setting up a recycling point for all those items that can't easily be recycled? And that is still something that you could do even now with the restrictions in place. We were at Tring Baptist Church just 10 days ago, our latest gold awarded church. And they've got a lovely whole series of recycling boxes outside their church, collecting everything from pens to glasses to stamps, which they will then go and take to people that can use them. So land is the third category. You might be in a church that doesn't have much land, but you really don't need very much of it to make a difference to nature and biodiversity. Even if the land that you have is a car park, you can still have flower planters. Even if it's land that you don't own, and as the bishop said, we don't really own the land, it's given to us to steward, you can still make a difference. Fields is one of our reserves. We've got two reserves in Rocha, UK. It's in Southall, and a very multicultural urban area where a Rocha UK was started almost 20 years ago. But this isn't our land, it's council owned. But it was once a very derelict piece of land loaded up with old furniture and frequented by drug users. And a Rocha approached the council to ask if we could restore it, look after it. And then following restoration, the site is now used as a place of contemplation. We have allotment garden space, beehives, orchards, a sensory garden, and we invite groups to come and enjoy being in the land and to see what can be done with a relatively small amount of land. So just last year we held a church's demonstration day, something that we hope to repeat next year, both at Woolfields and on our rural reserve in Foxearth. But it might be in time that as a church, if you're doing really exciting things on your land, you can invite others to see what you're doing, to share your experiences. These beautiful images are taken from St James's in Piccadilly, a church right in the heart of the city, not with a huge amount of land, but doing amazing things on it, including growing wheat so they could mill their own bread, and just sort of take us back to the experience of being in touch with the land. One of these images is of their bog garden. So they particularly have space for a pond, but they've made space for buckets where they've planted the right sort of plants for their area. They've got beautiful plane trees there as well, and have thousands of visitors who come in and use this space, okay, ordinarily in more normal times. And then as far as net zero, well, ideally don't pave over the land, restore it, protect it, enjoy it, lock carbon away in trees, get advice as to which ones to plant that are right for your circumstances. And then we always, as I've said earlier, emphasize enjoying nature and celebrating it. So next year, we're hoping to run with the Church of England and Caring for God's Acre, a pilot project, Churches Count on Nature, which will be a piece of citizen science about exploring what's on our doorsteps, and will hopefully instill a deeper love of and sense of place. And then fourthly, community and global engagement, the category of eco-church that's about encouraging local and global engagement with issues. So working with others at a community level, also potentially lobbying our MPs and campaigning on global environmental issues, which often impact the poorest the most. It's so easy to forget that earlier this year, before the pandemic, locust swarms had taken over parts of Eastern Africa and were rapidly eating the only source of food for many people in that region, where already 20 million people in East Africa were facing high levels of food insecurity because of climate change, drought and flooding and so on. So this section asks questions about how we're connecting with other groups, environmental groups in our area, transition towns if there's one near you, whether we're lobbying our MPs on local and national environmental issues like the Environment Bill that's going through, and the whole debate that's going on about the future of our food and farming at the moment as we come out of the European Union, or we have come out of it, but what is that going to look like going forward? We can be campaigning with organisations like Tear Fund and Christian Aid. And then finally is the lifestyle section, the category that encourages us to look at the practices and choices that we're making in our daily living. So, for example, encouraging the ethical investment of personal savings. Also helping us to look at our church funds, whether these are ethically invested, how we're banking. There are questions about travel and food, and sharing practical lifestyle tips in our churches. This is a great time to reset. We're already having to do church differently. So can we introduce new practices, new habits, and a new rhythm? And again, there are implications here for getting to net zero carbon. Coming back to food again, how land is farmed for food production has huge implications on its capacity to store carbon. So maybe take a look at the Soil Association website where you'll find a lot more about that. And also to say that this section links to our latest launched programme, Wild Christian, that's been going for about 12, 18 months, which is all about sharing ideas of what we can do in our own lives. And it's designed to encourage us as Christians to explore together questions around our faith and nature by inviting guest writers and bloggers and having a few seminars and so on. So do go to our website and sign up for that if that sounds of interest. This is what a map of 3,000 plus churches looks like, but we're not complacent. We want to get to 10% of churches across England and Wales registered for eco-church by 2023. We have to move faster and deeper. Whether you choose eco-church as a framework to support you, caring for the earth is a challenge, but also a long-term commitment that we need to make if we truly want to live holistic lives of Christian faith and mission. Then we have to embrace caring for creation and change the culture of our church for our sake, for wider society, for that of future generations. And we have to work with others to do it. Imagine churches as beacons of best practice in caring for the earth and embracing in our communities what's on our doorsteps. Local application with a global outlook. A few years ago, someone told me of a photographer who had captured lovely images of forest churches in Ethiopia, a country that's lost 95% of its native forests due to human activity in the last 100 years. On the website Church Forests, this is the text that goes with this image. In the north, the last remnants surround circular Tewahedo Orthodox church buildings, protected as a tenant of faith. To their guardians, each forest is a miniature Garden of Eden and essential to the dignity of the building. Imagine that we hold our churches and land, not only the forests, with that same respect. Imagine what we can do if we all care for the earth in our Christian lives.